Hello, listeners, old and new, especially new, because you're there. I see you, all those newbies lurking about. And welcome to the seasonal content of Dual Screens. That's
hmm
right, it is time for Andy Explains It All. I am one of your hosts, Andy Asimakis,
hmm
the smartest idiot, and I'll
hmm
explain a topic to our resident dumb idiot, the dumbest
That's
idiot
me.
of them all. As the man, the myth, the dum dum, Steven Fontana. Hi,
Oh
Steven.
hey, oh hey Andy, hey everybody. I'm a big old idiot, and I'm gonna learn something
You're
today.
gonna learn. This is gonna be a weird and short one,
Sure. Well,
much,
that's what you think,
much,
but I may have many
much
questions.
like my first boyfriend.
Ooh.
uh, but yeah, for those who are new to the show, welcome. This is, as I said before, one of our seasonal content shows, which ends, unfortunately, at the end of, what is it, April? We're doing this? Is that when it ends?
Yeah, yeah, and I
Aw.
forgot to change the episode on the little overlay.
Aw.
So while you're talking, I'm gonna
Aw.
I'm gonna do
So
this.
sad. But we do post our regular shows, our awesome shows, the Dual Screens podcast and the Dual Screens Gamescast. The first being an interview show where an awesome guest comes on from the gaming industry, be it a voice actor, a developer, an artist, a sound guy, you name it. And it's all great fun. Then there's the Gamescast, where we talk about all things gaming, the highlights,
hmm
the lowlights, the winners and losers. And those post each and every week on Thursday and Monday, respectively. And
That's
actually, I
true.
should have had those reversed. That made more
Doesn't
sense.
matter.
But you can find
Doesn't matter.
all that stuff on Spotify and YouTube, iHeartRadio,
Yep.
and all the other stuff that podcasts are found in.
I, I am finally. It is at 95%. It has taken an hour and 42 minutes so far to render the last Gamescast because I haven't been able to get to it
It's a long time.
because we've always had something to do, and this
Yeah.
obviously is from Monday. Plus, I had uh, issues with a hard drive
Right. You,
get
you, you
copying
have a
over
new
the
one
old
now, so
stuff.
you're good.
I know. I moved everything over from the 1 terabyte to the 4 terabyte, and one of the things that I moved over, Andy, was something that we recently that you recently gave me, which is a PlayStation emulator.
Ooh, yes.
So this was I had this downloaded directly to the original 1 terabyte hard drive, and the reason I did that was because the zip file or whatever it was of all of the what I believe are called ISOs were supposedly one pretty big file. So I wanted them not on my computer because my computer doesn't have a lot of space. It's only a 250 gig solid state drive. So I moved. I had that over there. So then, when I moved everything over to the 4 terabyte, I realized I only had the one game. I only had the Parasite Eve, which was uh, last episode's topic on Andy Explains It All. So go check that out if you want to know about Parasite Eve. So this kind of led me down a rabbit hole. I had the PSP, and I know that the biggest value in the PSP now, even on the secondary market, even now, is the emulation. It's a huge handheld emulator. A lot of people use it for that, so it's still pretty expensive on eBay and all that to get yourself a PSP for that reason. Also, I know that the NES and the SNES Mini have people like to crack them and put emulators on them and add games and all this stuff. And as much as it would be cool to do it, and I don't want to get into the ethics of it all, but
We
as much as
could
it would be cool to
at
do
some
it, I
point.
am all every time I look up the instructions to do it, I just get very confused. And I don't understand how any of this shit works. I don't understand anything about boot drives and BIOSes and all this other shit. I don't know what the hell's going on. I don't know rooting some things. I know rooting is kind of like
I
it's
think,
boot rooting, so it's
right.
like over it's
Sure.
circumventing the item's normal
Circumventing.
boot. I don't know.
Yes.
There's a lot of technical mumbo jumbo here, and I'm not necessarily expecting you to understand the technical
Oh,
side
I
of it.
don't, because I don't actually dabble in the science and the
Right.
tech side of it. I'm just more like I can read and I can watch a
Right.
video or two and have things not implode on me.
See, I haven't tried the YouTube video because I
It's a good
figured it'd be
approach.
more fun for you to explain it to me.
Oh God.
That's what I figure. That's kind of how I feel about it. Like I have a Game Boy and an NES emulator
Right.
program, whatever, on my cell phone,
Right.
and it's easy to download those ROMs. Well, it used to be until Nintendo went crazy and started taking all the
Well,
ROMs down.
yes and no. I think the ones that are still popular back in the day are still around. Like one or two big ones went down, but the bulk is still out there. They didn't do much.
Interesting.
They did not do much.
Interesting. They really only took down the ones that were charging for it, right?
Right.
Is that how that worked? Yeah. Interesting.
Yeah.
Interesting. So I don't even know how to really start,
Well, I
but
guess I can start with how I was first introduced to ROMs and emulation. That's a good like jumping off point.
I like it. I like it. Okay, it's a good place to start.
So I think we can also define off the bat two terms we'll hear a lot in this podcast. That's an ISO file, and
Uh
that's
huh.
a it is the complete image of a CD or a DVD,
Right.
another file content. And then the a ROM is similar, but it's based off a read-only memory chip, hence ROM.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where the bulk of like the older things like NES games are basically ROM files.
Mm-hmm.
So I was first introduced to emulation from a good friend of mine in junior high, and she had mentioned to me this program that allowed her to play every Nintendo game. I was like, "This no, that's not real. We're not at that point in life." And also at this point, I had my NES, SNES all hooked up in my room.
Sure.
So because it's I want to play my old games. So there was a program called Nesticle. Or,
I think I remember
right.
this.
It was, I think, one of the first NES emulators that were out there. Definitely not the best, but again, back in the day, these things weren't as evolved as they are today. Even though
Mm.
today, like, some of the best ones are the older ones that have been around for at least 10, 15 years. So, Nesticle, it was the icon was an actual pair of testicles.
Right. Of
Right.
course. Sure. It
And
was the '90s after all,
yes,
or early
yes.
2000s.
So I downloaded it, and she told me you have to look for like the game files online. Just do a Google search, and you'll find websites with like just this host all the games. I'm like, this is crazy. So back in the day, I'm not sure if it still exists in for modern emulation and ROM sites, but they had a huge warning that if you didn't own the game, you must erase it within
Yeah.
24 hours.
Right.
Now, me being like a 12-year-old kid, I took the warning very seriously.
Sure. I think we all did.
So, with a bit of googly magic, or I guess then it was like net zero searching or AOL searches. There's no googly back then.
Something like that. Yeah.
Right. Or Yahoo searches.
Yahoo. Yeah.
Um, yeah, you'd basically have the program which would emulate, well, we can define that too, uh, what a Nintendo did. Like the intricate guts of the system. Like it would duplicate a Nintendo on your computer
Right.
um, to a certain extent. So you would open this program, which had, I would say, just like file. You can load a ROM, and the game changer for me was this thing called save states,
Oh, of course. Yes. Yes.
which you can save an exact point in the gameplay. So all these games I had trouble on when I was a kid, um, or never finished, like Battletoads, which is impossible when I was a kid, had a second life to them because now I could use save states and actually, quote unquote, well, beat or cheat my way to the end, essentially.
Mm.
So that was my first introduction to emulation and just downloading games illegally. And then I was like, shit, if there's Nintendo, wouldn't there be Genesis and Game Boy Color and Super Nintendo and everything? And as it turns out, if it existed as a game system, I want to say up until the Wii U, there exists an emulator for it out there.
See, that's interesting because when I was a kid, yes, my brother, I have an older brother. My older brother had all these emulators. He also had MAME.
Right,
So he would,
arcade
yeah,
emulator. Mhm.
which is the arcade one, right? Which is the one he really liked a lot. Like that was the one he wanted it for, and I think he like the main reason was Marvel vs. Capcom. I
Right,
want to
which
say.
before I don't want to cut you off, but if you want to play those games proper, you really need to get, I think it's CPS, the CPS 2 and 3, the chipset for the specific Capcom arcade machines. And they
Yeah,
work,
you
yeah,
see, that's where you lose me
right. So,
because now you're asking me to download multiple
right.
things, and so here's what happens. Here's what happens when I get
Because
like
MAME is a catch-all. It's good for most arcade
right.
games.
There are simple emulators that I could do. Like I could do Game Boy. I could do most of the um, ROM ones. Anything where you could download a ROM are the ones that I could run easily because the programs typically find the ROMs wherever you put them.
Right.
Like
Or,
if you just put them in downloads, they'll find them.
right.
Um,
Make a ROM folder and just, or call it games and just point it there.
right.
Right.
So I mean that part was easy, and plus the programs themselves, it's literally you just extract it wherever you're going to extract it, and you just double click the program and it runs, and that's it. You're pretty much good to go.
Yeah.
Now there were other programs that I didn't quite understand how to make work. There was one a long time ago. It was a PlayStation emulator, I believe. Yeah, and that was the first time I was introduced to ISOs. And what you had to do was you had to run. You ran the program right, and then it would say load BIOS,
Mm-hmm.
and then you would point it to the game file that not the ISO, the I guess BIOS of the game. I don't really know how that works, or like the PlayStation BIOS. I don't know. Then it would say insert disk,
Hmm.
and then you would have to take the ISO and like drag it into the program as if you're
Ooh.
putting in a disk into the pro. Like this is like whatever. And for me, the the files were pretty large for back then. I mean, we're talking about what few megabytes,
For
like
for a
60.
PS1 game, the
Yeah,
maximum it would be was 700, but some
yeah,
would be
something
like
like that.
80 megabytes, and you would think, shit, that was on a disc. That's all it took up, like no space whatsoever.
Right, right. Um, so yeah, like that. There was that. Then I had, and I don't know if this has anything to do with emulation, but I also had I had a mod chip for my PS1, which went into the serial port in the back of the PS1.
Mhm.
It was just like a little gray box that you plugged into the serial port on the back, and it had a switch up or down. And if you put it up, then the chip was on, and what it would do is it would simulate I guess the region lock or whatever it was.
Mhm.
I guess it would simulate that boot up, and then so you'd put a regular PlayStation disc in. You press, and I had to put a spring. On the PlayStation, there's that little gray
Yeah.
stick, and then it
Mhm.
would push the button. It would let you know when the
Right.
when the lid was closed.
Mhm.
So you had to put a spring in there, so that when you opened the lid, it would still have that button pushed.
Right.
Okay, so you put a disc in, you would turn it on, you would flip the switch, and then it would say insert disc. After it would do like the initial Sony boot up,
Mhm.
then you would lift the top, take the disc out, and then put the pirated game
Right.
or imported game because it worked for imports as well. And that's actually why I bought it, was because I wanted to play Dragon Ball Z Final Fight, which was a Japanese only game.
Right.
So
So, do you know what's happening there?
what I assume is happening is that it is boot. It's essentially probably loaded with the BIOS from a either a Japanese
Mhm.
console or it is essentially bypassing uh like a burned disc wouldn't have the PlayStation boot up BIOS on it because it was a special disc. It was a special laser, a special disc or whatever. So like these discs, I believe the information was on the very inner ring
Right.
of the disc. So like a PlayStation would look for this and on a regular burned CD it wouldn't find it.
Mhm.
because our CD-ROM rewritables couldn't do that.
Hmm.
Um, only if I guess PlayStation had a patent on that or whatever. Um, but what it would do is it would read that part off of a normal disc, and then when you would pull it out and then put the other disc, and it would just kind of continue from there, and it would have the check. And I think. And when you gave me the PlayStation emulator so I could try Parasite Eve, I think that's what intimidated me is because it was asking like BIOS and stuff and like all this other shit, and I'm like, oh god, am I gonna have to like figure out how to load a
Well,
BIOS into this emulator and
a
like,
few things. So the folder I gave you, all the BIOS was there. It was just pointing where the BIOS was. It's in the BIOS folder. So
mm,
there's that. So you can have zero stress if that's the case. And I think what's happening in for your PS1 mod is a lot like my PS2 mod. So my PS2, I modded for Silent Hill 4, which came out, I believe, a month or 2 months earlier in Japan and Europe than in the States. So because of that fact, I was a huge, raging fan for Silent Hill, and it was at that point fully translated with subtitles and the English language. It's like, why wait? So I bought this thing. It was called a Swap Magic and a flip top cover.
I remember
So what
this. Yeah.
happens with, I think, with your PS1 instance, when you put in that initial disc and it reads the data off of it, and then you insert the copy, the burned copy, or an import game, for example, the PS1 thinks it's taking the data off the original disc, which says, "Hey, I'm a normal CD. I'm a normal boot up. Whatever comes next is totally fine by you.
Hmm.
Just read the data." With Swap Magic, the trick there is you would put a boot disk in the PS2. It would read the data and it would say insert disk. Now, the flip top was essentially making like a PS1 with
Right.
on
I
top.
remember that. Yeah.
Because once you eject the disc from the PS2 and put a new one in, it rereads the disc and says, "Hold up, this is not a legit disc," or "This is from Japan. Get out. You don't belong here." So
Thank God they stopped that.
right. So the yeah, right. So the swap magic was like, okay, similar scenario. It reads a disk, it loads some data and says, okay, whatever goes in next, I'm not gonna reread and just load it as if it was there from the beginning. It's
Hmm.
a proper boot. So once I had that working for Silent Hill 4, the next step was just straight up piracy. And I that's when I got my first GameFly account for obvious
Mm.
reasons. I have books and books filled with just games on CDRWs or DVDRWs.
Mm.
Yeah.
Living the dream. Now, this, of course, was what brought down the Dreamcast.
So the Dreamcast is an interesting thing. That was way ahead of its time. Um, Given the internet connection, and it was a very, how should I put this, open system to
Right.
the point where you could put a Nintendo, we call this homebrew, like programs for
Hmm.
the
Yep.
system.
Yep. Yep.
You could put like your Super Nintendo games on a CD or a DVD and play them on your Dreamcast, or your NES games, or your Saturn games. Um,
Now it ran a modified version of a Windows, right?
right.
It was that the Windows OS. I can't remember if it was Windows or Linux.
It was
I
no, I
know.
think it was Linux for
Okay,
that
because
one.
I know PS4 and no PS4 I think ran off of Linux. I
Right.
think PS3 might have also.
Remember when they had that Open OS for PS3 and they took that away?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that was a shame. Um, but yeah, so once, and it's the same issue that kind of affected the PSP too, is piracy. once that code was cracked and it was like off to the races because essentially they were like a handful of great games for Dreamcast, but why would you buy them if you could just download them and pirate them? Because it was
Well, from what I remember, there wasn't any real safeguard. You
there
could literally
wasn't
just copy the
there wasn't
disc,
yeah,
and that was it.
none at all.
That's all you needed
Yeah.
to do.
And then it got even worse when things like Bleemcast. Can you remember Bleemcast
Oh, I
or
remember
Bleem?
that Bleem was
Yeah.
the
It was a
PlayStation.
commercial PS1 emulator for Dreamcast, which was insane.
Right.
Like they had this video of you playing like Metal Gear Solid, Ridge Racer, and of course, like there was massive lawsuits with this. And
Sony lost.
yeah, they did.
I remember
They
that.
did.
Yeah, Sony lost
Yeah.
that.
Which is like amazing. Um, but yeah, so I think when it comes to emulation with regards to the classics, NES, SNES, Game Boy, even Virtual Boy, most NES or SNES emulators can play the older stuff. Like my Nintendo can run Game Boy games, Game Boy Color games. I think it's called FC Ultra something 2.5,
Mm.
and it can run like every game Nintendo back, which is nice and convenient. And even maybe Virtual Boy, which is great.
I don't know how you would play Virtual Boy
I mean, it's all just
games.
red and black, but it's still the game itself.
Huh.
Game Gear was also a thing. If it existed, it was totally on the internet. Um, Now, the reason why I love piracy so much and emulation is, at the very least for Nintendo and Super Nintendo games, it gave rise to what we call ROM hacking,
Right.
which I think in modern times or in the last like 10 or 15 years or so, um, in the land of Half-Life and early Doom titles, we call these mods today, obviously,
Right.
or total conversions. That's like a complete like scrapping of the game and putting your own on top of it, like new models, new weapons, new environments, all just built from the ground up new, but with the existing engine in place. So imagine that, but with an NES game. Could you imagine that there is a Metroid game that exists today
Mm.
that looks almost nothing like any asset you can find in Metroid? Like every sprite has been totally redrawn to look completely different, and that exists. Or say a Mega Man 4 ROM hack, which takes the base game, adds like five other games of stuff in it from other Mega Man games, new music, retools every weapon, and it's like a brand new experience. I think that's
Mega Man 4 Super
it's
Hyper.
actually called Minus Infinity. Look it up one time. It is
Hmm.
it's kind of insane what this guy did to that game.
It's essentially what Capcom was doing with Street Fighter
Right,
anyway.
right,
Like Street Fighter 2
right.
Turbo.
So things were easy for a while
Mm.
with emulation. It was just here's your program, get your file, load so and so, and you can play. Um, and most of them supported joystick, so you can attach a little USB joystick, play with that for a bit, and
Sure.
it's like your actual NES or retro game system or the arcade. Now arcades were a little bit trickier because again the BIOS thing, and it was getting the right files. So most arcade game ROMs are multiple zip files. And if you're missing one, you can't load the game.
Why would they do this to us,
It's
Andy?
just how it is.
Just
So,
make it one
yeah,
file.
no,
Come
you
on.
can't. It's something with the arcade machine's architecture.
Well, a lot of those,
Right.
as far as what I understand, and they talk about this a lot on like the Giant Bombcast and stuff like that. Um, like the cabinets that we grew up playing,
Mhm.
a lot of them, especially I think Mortal Kombat cabinets, there was a way to convert Street Fighter
Mm.
cabinets to Mortal Kombat cabinets. And what they would do is they would send you instructions as the arcade owner. They would send you the graphics, they would send you all that stuff, but then they would send you the instructions on how to like essentially repurpose the chip
Right.
inside the unit to run something completely
Mhm.
different. And I imagine these games eventually became Frankenstein's monsters where you're like the Street Fighter chip is a Galaga chip is a whatever chip and it's like just these like if you ever have you ever looked in one of those old cabinets there's like
Yeah.
boards and
Yeah, and
wires and shit
also
all
the
over the
chips
place.
themselves are always evolving. Like if you look
Right.
at Mortal Kombat, let's say part two, for example, um, and you try to download it, the arcade version offline, there's like dozens of revisions that are
Right.
based off newer chipsets.
Right. Now, how do you know which one to download? Like how do
Well,
you
again,
where do you start?
with that, it's all just knowing where to look. And unfortunately for YouTube, where this show would go on one day, hopefully tomorrow or at some point, we really can't say where to get this shit from. It's like a big no-no. I
Okay.
could give us some links, but
Well, there are websites and stuff
right,
and like again, we don't want to get into the ethics of it
right,
like when I did Wednesdays, when Nest days, when I was
right.
playing NES games on
They were
Wednesdays,
all pirated games.
they were pirated emulated games, but I tried to unless there was a really rare game people wanted me to play, I tried to only emulate the games that I did physically own the
Yes, and
cartridge or you.
you would flash the cartridge before playing the game. Like, right,
Yes, I
I own
would
this.
show it in the camera.
But no one
Mostly
gives a shit though.
no most people know. They
Yeah.
don't give a shit. But I I guess that brings me to the ethics question. Now, we there's no ifs, ands, or buts. It's wrong to do it, right? But what the question I want to ask is, should it be?
Right. So this is a good segue into when I really started going hard on piracy because the PS2, which was modded, and my GameFly account, plus the Staples being 2 blocks from my house to get DVD RWs, meant I had books and books filled with games. Now, my PS2 library was quite extensive. It was about 200 games deep. So I wasn't shy about purchasing games. If it was a game I wanted to play, I'd buy it and play it. Gamefly was more of curiosity. Games I don't think I would have actually purchased. But it was more like I wanted a collection. So if the game looked even a little bit interesting, I would get it and burn it and play it.
Now, I want to interject here because
Right,
isn't that the purpose of GameFly? That you can rent the game,
right,
try it, plug it in, you
right,
don't like it, send it back,
right,
get the next one.
right.
Why burn it at that
I
point?
was getting it, burning it, and sending it back immediately just to get more games. It was all about
Right.
volume and quick
Sure.
turnaround. It wasn't about trying
Well,
the game.
I have a friend of mine did that with DVDs. Like he did that
Right.
with the movies with
I
Netflix. Like he
would
would get the three movies at a
right.
time, get them, burn them, send them back. You know all
I
that
would
stuff.
literally have 5 games come at a time, burn them that same day, and then send them back out for the next batch.
Huh.
I had a whole list. I have a whole doc of all of my all my files. So that led into now for a long time things were quiet. When the PS3 came around and the 360, which by the way the Xbox OG
Yeah.
is a great machine to hack. And it's like a better version of Dreamcast. It
Mm.
allowed way more homebrew. And there's a one reason to have a Xbox today is for a program called Mugen. Mugen is like a homebrew. arcade fighting system or engine, but you can import assets from, let's say, Street Fighter, Mortal Kombat, Clay Fighter, Streets of Rage, Primal Rage, any fighting game you can imagine, and make your own fighting game. You can set the assets, the background art, the music, the select screen, the damage effects, sound effects. So that is a great way to experience that platform on the
Hmm.
Xbox, which
By
I
the
have two
way,
now.
Dreamcast,
Yeah.
I just looked it up because I remembered now.
Hmm.
Dreamcast ran Windows CE,
Ah, yes. That's what did it.
the whatever.
So when PS3 came around and the Xbox 360, I was like, okay, well, these things are too new. They're not, no one's gonna pirate these yet. Um, so fuck, I gotta buy games again, which is fine. But, I wasn't exactly at that time employed. I was in college when those
Hmm.
systems came out. So I had both systems, but my main was the 360 because back then it was about Call of Duty, Gears of War, and Halo 2. That was my life.
Right.
So at about the fourth or maybe fifth Red Ring of Death,
Oh, geez. Yeah.
it was getting pricey to be an Xbox 360 owner for me as a broke college student. And I turned to piracy. Now, this comes in two flavors. There's the initial version, which was costly and could sometimes cause a red ring of death at your own risk.
Huh.
And then there was the evolved version, which is what a lot of hack systems today rely on. So the first version was you had this program, I think it was called XEX. It was like a kernel that was ran on the Xbox console that allowed you to run copied games. So I could rip Gears of War and start the system as it was on this super fancy. It looked like the dash, but not quite, and would play the games easily. But the fan would overheat sometimes, and the
Mm.
system, and it went
Presumably because it's doing two things at once.
right,
It's still running the
right,
original OS
and
and
it's
running
and,
the
and
whatever
it's
the
trying
other.
to run the burn game
Right.
as well. And for that, there was like all these weird fixes. Like you could apply more thermal paste to make sure it didn't overheat
Yeah.
quickly. It was a whole thing. It was a big project to go the burned um, DVD route on 360. So I did that because I was
That's what you're used to.
right. I was just yeah, and I had a guy that did it for me. Like he burned my games and at no charge, and I would see him once a week. I was like, hey, do you have this new game? Like, yeah, I got it. Here you go,
Hmm.
and I'll play them. So I did that for a while, and then my last original Xbox 360 crapped out. I was like,
Dun
shit,
dun.
this is fucked now. Like I've gone through six of these goddamn things. I'm just done. Then the Xbox 360 Slim came out,
Ooh,
and
fancy.
a better system of piracy was introduced. That was it would hack the actual 360 system with a custom dashboard. So it would boot to a whole new layout. It's like changing your OS for your phone.
Okay.
Like it's not going to be this kernel will be a different one with a whole different setup, but the same basic guts of what runs an Xbox 360. This allowed you to attach a portable hard drive
Mm.
to your 360 and it would show you a massive games list. It would just read the drive, and say, okay, all these games are in here based on folders. And it was like having an all digital library back in the day.
Right.
And it was awesome. And it still works today. That same hack 360 of mine.
Now, to get the files on there, how did you get
So
the games?
that was done through torrents.
Okay, so
All
that
done through
okay,
torrents.
yeah,
So
yeah.
you can go to, I mean, this is pretty well known. The Pirate Bay is a
Right.
huge like avenue for everything pirated, as it does. And you'd find the full game files of any game you can think of.
So the way torrents work, and this is something that I always fascinated
Mhm.
about. You're not downloading you're not downloading the game from a peer. You're downloading the game from
It's
multiple
pieces
peers.
from different people, yeah.
Right. So technically the person that has this game is not letting you copy the whole game. They're letting you copy
Bits
a
and
few.
pieces of it.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
And then you would get the pieces from somebody else and whatever. It's like that's why
Right.
I guess they're called, I don't know. Yeah, BitTorrent. I don't know. That was one of the
Yeah,
sites I used to
BitTorrent
use.
I would
BitTorrent.
use Kazaa, I would use
LimeWire was
LimeWire
one
was one I
too.
would
Yep.
use, some other ones too. But yeah, you would see like
Azure. No.
Ozurus.
Azure. Azurus. That's
Ozurus,
what it
yeah.
was. Yeah.
I use uTorrent today for those kind of things. It's very reliable. It's very, very tiny. Um, so yeah, so for torrents, like you were saying before, it would say like this game or this file has 10 connected peers who are uploading or what they call seeding the file
Right.
online. The best communities for those, which is why I don't really trust Pirate Bay often, is the private ones where you need an invite to get into
Mm-hmm.
and you have to maintain a certain share ratio. And that system is if you're downloading a bunch of shit, you have to upload a bunch of shit.
Right.
It's a give and take. And if you just what they call leech files, they'll ban you if you don't share. It's very
Yeah, I remember
it's
that.
very
Yeah.
it's a nice system. It's
So I never
it's
did it for
quality.
games. I never did it for games or movies, but I always did it for uh, when I went to Warp Tour, I would get the Warp Tour CD, and it would have like
Were
50
you big
artists
on
on it.
Napster back in the day as well?
So no, I know Napster was before I was allowed to like really
Did you use the computer?
like not use it, but like be on my own
Right.
kind of thing.
We don't trust it.
Like I was probably like 9
Okay.
when Napster came out, like 9 or 10.
Mhm.
It was really until like when I was like 11, 12, or 13 when I really started to like get into it. And oh god, we broke so many computers. So many computers got viruses because of this stuff. But I when in high school we'd go to Warp Tour, I would get a CD that had like it was basically a compilation of like 50 different artists. I would hear a song that I really like, but there's no way for me to know if the whole album's good, right? Unless I bought it, in which case I'm not buying it based off of one song that I heard.
Right.
So that's what I would do. I would go on Kazaa and LimeWire or whatever, and I would put in the artist, and I'd find how many albums they had, and I would download all the albums, and then we would burn them on an MP3 disc, and I had one of those CD players that can read MP3 discs and whatever. Um, so that I was familiar with that kind of thing. Now, what I do want to talk about, and I know you've done it. You've hacked your mini consoles, correct?
So I just recently found in the trash two Xbox OGs and an SNES um classic.
Yeah, I don't know why
I don't know why
somebody
either.
would throw those
They
out.
were I'm telling you, dude, they were immaculate.
Mm.
Like I would say maybe used once or twice. I mean, the Xbox are a little bit wear and tear because they're old. They're like over almost 2 decades old at this point, right?
Mm.
Maybe 10 years. I don't know.
2002.
Sure. So we're getting there. Approaching 20 years old for the Xbox consoles. So the SNES, immediately I was like, how do I hack this thing?
Because you already have one, right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Um, so there's a program, I believe it's called Hatchy, I believe.
Okay.
And it's a simple program that you put on your computer and you point to a folder on your desktop or computer that has all your, let's say, SNES or even NES games, and you can load them into this program,
Mm-hmm.
and you can pick even box art
Yes,
for
I
each
remember seeing
game,
that. Yeah,
and you can just load it onto the Super Nintendo. Now,
just plug it right into the computer.
right, and now it does what's called for a lot of these systems, like the 360 and the even the Wii. The Wii was like notorious for piracy because it was so easy to do. Um, you could even do,
I remember people were running games off of like SD cards, if
yeah,
I remember
you could
correctly.
even for the Wii, you could even download WiiWare. So
Mm.
all the store, like the WiiWare store games, they're
Mm-hmm.
like digital only. You could do that whole library was also online. I have
Mm.
what's called a WAD collection or WAD collection. That was the file format for all the WiiWare games. It's every game ever created for the Wii that you can play from your Wii system. Now, the Wii, I can also play PS1 games, NES games, SNES, arcade, Game Boy. Like once a system is hacked and homebrew exists already, they would just tweak it to get it working on the hack system.
Mm.
That's why you'll see on phones and all these older emulation systems,
Mm-hmm.
same names, but for different platforms. Like it's this for the Wii. It's it's PSXE, but it's for the Wii. It's called Wii SX or Wii PSX. Because they have similar kind of mechanics and programming.
Right.
So to go back a bit, for the SNES Classic and for other systems, you do what's called flashing. That's like when you rewrite parts of the actual software in the console. Now, with this, there runs a slight chance, they always warn you, of bricking the system.
Yeah, that's a
And
problem.
that means it's basically becomes a brick. It's a paperweight, it's a doorstop, it's useless. But if you read the instructions, they always say, unless you really fuck up or you're just that dumb, you will likely not brick your system. I have been doing this for years. I have done it to my Wii, my PSP, which we'll get to in a minute, my PSTV, my
Mm.
Vita, um, and the SNES Classic on my
Like
own.
the PSP and the Vita, like you and the Vita TV, they need to be on like a certain firmware, right?
Yes. So firmware, again, it's like the BIOS of the system, um, in that regard. They would do what was called a custom firmware.
Mm.
So even there was some fuckery about because let's say you had updated your firmware, like it's like your OS, like oh version 5.2 is out
Yeah,
for
yeah.
PS4. So if you would update that, you sometimes couldn't put in the custom firmware because they had put security to block the old hacks. These fuckers figure out a way to downgrade firmware.
Right.
So like even though they had this new firmware that was like, we have way more security now, they came along, the inner nerds, and were like, nope, we're gonna make it so you can downgrade to where you need to be safely. And then you can install the custom firmware, which is like an amazing thing. Even my 3DS could do that. Now the 3DS was nice because you could do a software hack with an SD card as you plug it in, turn it on, and it loads data on the 3DS. And you can use a flash card, which is shaped like a DS or 3DS cartridge, but with
Mm.
a little slit on top for a micro SD card, which had again like a full digital library.
Yes, I remember
So
that
there
as
was
well.
that. I think my DS, which I have around here somewhere, shit. There it is. Actually, can we do a little show and tell?
We can.
Oh shit, I can't. Can we? Well, we can. We totally can. So this over here,
Audio listeners, he's showing me a
if
cartridge.
you can see it,
Yes, I can see it.
is an M3 adapter.
M3
It's
adapter.
for
Right.
DSi, DSE, and DS. It was a movie player, but it's actually like a game cartridge. And on the side here, if we click, I have a 2 gigabyte
There it is.
micro SD
It's a
card,
little micro SD.
which has, I think, all the best Game Boy games, DS games on there. So you pop it in here. Oh my god, is that a charge? It's been years. I doubt it though. Let's see. Where's power on this? Oh, it's on the side. It's turning on! It's turning on! Okay, touchscreen to continue.
He's showing us his criminal history, ladies and gentlemen.
There's no DS card inserted. That's a little disconcerting. Let's do a little one of these.
Oh, classic, blowing in the
That
cartridge.
works.
For those who are listening and not watching, Andy has a white DSi.
Um,
Andy is wearing a Legend of Zelda
I
beanie.
am.
I am wearing my Bulbasaur cap backwards with a Captain Marvel t-shirt.
I am trying to join a chat room right now.
PictoChat, right? That was a great thing that Nintendo did with
So
PictoChat.
it just died on me.
All right, well,
So, but there it is, though. There's a cartridge. I mean, it's pretty clever, and they had this for Game Boy Advance, Game Boy, for every portable Nintendo system that came out there.
so the last question I want to ask you, and then we'll wrap it up.
Right.
The current generation of systems, the PS4, the Xbox One,
Oh yes. So I think
are there hacks for this as well?
there are, but not to the point. I know that people rip all the games. You can find the game files on torrent sites. But honestly, if you have a machine that can run a PS4 or an Xbox One, you can run a PC game.
Right.
And you can find full PC games online. And it's like it's always in RAR files, like chunks. It's to help reduce like the file size when you initially download it. And then
Right.
RAR, it's like a big giant file. And they're usually an image file or an ISO. And then if you mount that to your computer, you can install the game to your hard drive. Like you bought the game.
Now, okay,
Right.
that's fine.
Right.
But what about for the people who want to play those hot PS4 exclusives?
Well, you see, that's no. At this point, there's no way that I know of to play like God of War.
Well,
Get a PS Now. That's what you can do.
get PS Now. That's how you do it. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is what I wanted to know about piracy and emulation. And Andy is going to probably take one of my things and put some stuff on it so I could learn
Yeah.
how to do it myself. We'll do it together.
It's fun. I mean, listen, it's Google, it's reading, it's watching some videos. Yeah, it's like you get a weird satisfaction when you get it to work, and a little obsessive when it doesn't work. I'd be up all night
Only,
getting things to work.
yeah. But what we are going to be advocating, again, live here in the flesh, for your audio ears and for your video eyes, only do this for things you own already,
Right.
so you don't get in trouble.
Oh, and also, I mean, there is a PS4 emulator out there, but it runs like dog shit.
I
It's
would.
just
I would.
maybe 5 years from now, it'll be somewhat semi decent. But you even for Dreamcast, some games don't even run properly. Even N64, which by the way, a little final closer here, the complete file size for the entire N64 library is about 7 gigs. That's how tiny it is.
70 or 7?
7.
Oh.
Yeah.
Well, yeah, well, there was only like 100 and some odd games for
Right,
that, right?
but
Wasn't there like 140 games?
Cartridge based to like PS1 CD.
Yeah.
There's like no data storage on the cartridge.
Yeah.
Yeah. But yeah, we should do a get together at your house. I can bring my computer and some hard drives and some micro SDs and SD cards,
Mm.
and we can fuck with your Vita. And also today, I may go into a new avenue because Ken, for some reason, against my wishes, bought a Switch Lite today. He bought the
Oh.
Sword and Shield version. I was like, why? I told you to wait until some sort of pro version comes out. Because
Whatever. You could trade it
it's
in.
going to happen at some point. I know it is. But he bought it, and now it's here. So now I'm thinking to hack my Switch and take it offline.
Whoa.
Because one of my friends has a hack Switch, and he plays all the indie games, which I do not support at all. Because
Got to give the money
I
to the
feel
little
like
guy.
if you're gonna steal from someone, take from fucking the big boys who can afford to take a hit. Um, but yeah, I think I want to just dip my toe in that just to get all of my physical games on the system in some way. Like let's say I want to
Hmm.
put Zelda, Mario, Mario Kart, or anything that's non-online um like heavy. Like Smash,
Sure.
I'll obviously play on a system that can go online, but like Breath of the Wild, yeah, I could play that offline. Mario Odyssey, yeah, offline. But Mario Party, nope, that's a no-go. That's got to be on a legit system.
Interesting.
Hmm.
Well, that takes us to the end. I'll do the rigmarole, and then you'll take us home. If you remember, folks, you can follow us if you like what we do here. Give us a subscription if you're listening to us on your podcast service, and that service happens to have some way to review us. Please consider giving us a review. Apple Podcasts, especially. If you like what you hear, please give us a 5-star review. It'll help us out tremendously. If you're on YouTube, give us a subscription, a thumbs up, leave a comment, all that fun stuff. If you want to follow us on Twitter, you can do so at NDS Podcast. I am at Batchild27. Andy is at Pants Guy. If you want to join our Facebook group, you can do so at facebook.com/groups/dual screens podcasts. You could also follow our just regular dual screens page at dualscreens.com slash dualscreens.com. That's DOTCOM. What else? Yes, you can follow us on Twitch at twitch.tv/dual screen streams. If you are listening to this and you want to subscribe to our YouTube channel, you can just go to dualscreens.com/YouTube and it'll show up. Speaking of dualscreens.com, that is where you can find everything that we do. And it's also where you could read our reviews, you could read our articles. We have a couple of really great editors that write some really interesting stuff, including Andy and I. Although we've been doing more of the podcasting stuff, but also you could go to dualscreens.com/store, where you could buy our latest and greatest merchandise off of our Teespring shop. Thank you to our Patreon producer, Colton, the apprentice Nestler. We cannot continue to grow without your support. And if you want to support us on Patreon, just simply go to patreon.com/NDS podcast. For as little as $1, $1, you could help us out a lot. And you get a bonus episode every month. You get to vote on what we're going to talk about. Plus, and this is probably the most exciting, you get super access to our super secret VIP Discord. Super access behind the scenes. Get to hang out with us in Discord, hang out with each other, and hang out with our indie dev guests from the Dual Screens podcast. Folks, we will be at PAX East in less than a week. Less than a week from when you are listening, we're going to be right in the middle, jam-packed into a PAX East bonanza. So we cannot wait to report everything that we see there. And that's it. Andy, why don't you take us out of here?
Thank you so much, Stephen, for joining me on this little piracy journey.
Indeed.
Um, Hope you learned something. Just more about how why I got into this whole thing and
I
why
learned that there's a lot more piracy out there than I had any
there's a
idea
lot.
about.
And I came to actually teach you in person how all this stuff works. Um, but before we go, I want to ask you one question.
Uh-huh.
What is next week's topic?
So it's going to be 2 weeks.
Right.
So we're
All
officially
right.
caught
We're
up
caught
on
up,
our Andy
Andy.
Explains It All. All right. So So it's gonna be episode 5, which means there's gonna be 2 more after that. So I already know what our finale is gonna be, and you already know what the finale is
Oh
gonna be.
God, yeah, I do.
We already spoke about
I
that.
do.
Yes, you do. Um, so I haven't really decided what next week is gonna be. I'm still trying to figure out. Like I'm trying to ask you about things that you're passionate about without you knowing that's what I'm doing,
Okay.
so that I can. And it typically has to be something I'm not very passionate about.
Uh-huh.
Um, all right. You know what? I'm just gonna pick it. I'm gonna pick it, and we're gonna do it.
Okay.
We already did Stephen King,
Okay.
and I kind of want to go back to that non-gaming avenue.
Okay.
And I think there's somebody else that I would really like to know the history of because I only know the marquee franchises.
All right.
Let's explore your vast knowledge and your vast love for Wes Craven.
Ooh. Okay. This is a good topic. That's a lot of good stuff in there.
I feel like Wes Craven is more of a household name than most horror icons. I guess there's John Carpenter,
Mhm.
but I feel like didn't have. I guess no, he didn't really have the longevity. I don't think. Like Wes Craven's still doing things.
He's dead.
Wasn't he? Didn't he produce something not too long ago?
He's a dead man. He's a very
How
much
long is he
dead man.
dead?
Years.
Who am I thinking of? Didn't somebody just do the Scream TV series? And the original creator like was helping
Kevin
produce it.
Williamson, who was the writer for Scream.
Oh, maybe that's what I'm thinking
Right.
of. Okay, but so that there you go. I'm an idiot. I don't know
That Wes
about Wes Craven. I
died.
didn't even know I didn't even know he was dead. So that's gonna be 2 weeks from now, as we continue our seasonal content of Andy Explains It All.
Okay. Great stuff.
Indeed. Say goodbye to people so we can get out of here.
Bye, people.
Love you. Be excellent to each other.